Well, salutations and hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT network. What? I gotta do something fun. I missed like the last two, so
And you're leaving
get it
early
out now. Maybe it depends on the Avs game. But welcome to the show, the 5280 podcast on the MHRT network. I know we're starting just a tad late. That is on me. I decided to go to my kids' concert. I'm sorry. Whatever. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well. We had the jersey reveal yesterday at 9:00. I'm on cloud nine. I made the Denver Broncos Instagram reel about like 15 minutes ago. So I'm on cloud nine. I'm doing just fine.
We get the jerseys, we get the draft, we get other quarterback news as well. It really just feels like Christmas time here in Broncos country. I think everybody's pumped.
It's exciting. I gotta say, I was kind of curious. I don't know if I said it much, but I was kind of curious if they were gonna handle the jersey releases exactly like a schedule release, and they did. Like the first video that dropped felt like a Ford commercial, and then of course the catharsis of the throwback video that dropped, where Surtain is, I'm guessing he's in Larimer Square, but like he's walking there and he sees the 5280 address. He walks in and he goes back in time, right? He goes back in time to the 1970s, I would imagine. And he walks into the store, he pulls out that old jersey, and then you hear a guy's voice in the back saying, basically, can I help you? And of all things, it's Randy Gradishar giving him help about that throwback uniform. You could not have scripted a better jersey release video for the Broncos.
And I got to say, the fact that our podcast is showing up as a sponsor of the Broncos uniform next year, we didn't have to pay anything for that, is pretty spectacular.
That's right.
I mean, our logo shows up on
we want to thank the Denver Broncos for their support.
Thank you, guys. I couldn't be happy.
Greg Penner, you're awesome. Thanks for helping us set that all up with you. It's
free advertising, baby.
Right. All right. So speaking of which, and we'll get into some other things, but we'll go ahead and just do it now, and then we'll talk about it. And that was a video that the Broncos released for the uniform unveiling. and I appreciate whoever's going to copyright claim that. You're welcome. I
feel like I should have like a Coors Banquet beer.
I had to edit and mute it in my video because I probably lost about half my revenue. It got copyright claimed.
Yeah, it is what it is. Whatever. But yeah, basically it breaks down into what they're calling the Mile High Collection, and this is everything that they've done with the new uniforms, different variations on it. There's only a couple on here that I don't like, and the Garrett Bowles one with the blue jersey and the orange pants, not a fan. I don't I don't like that one.
Yeah, I think that if there's anything, and this was probably the best way to look at it for any of those Debbie Downers that were, with the, jersey release that was out there, the best way to look at this is it's an upgrade, right? If you look at it from the simple point, it's an upgrade, which it is. That's exactly the way that they are. They're an upgrade, and I think that one of the big things that I really do like about the way that they've gone about it is there are a lot of combinations they can work with this uniform. They may not wear all of them, but there are so many combinations they can work with. I think the only unfortunate thing is I don't think they can wear the blue helmet with the all blue. They can't do that.
It's considered an alternate helmet, alternate uniform. Alternate has to be white.
Right. And so, but that's not going to stop us if we ever use Madden to actually create the inevitable, which would be those all, blue with the navy blue helmet. Still, no, that just a very, very clean look. And I'll tell you, I think that I was very. The initial part was like I was a bit lukewarm on the orange uniforms, but the more you see the leaks and the graphics that have come out on some of these players like Surtain and some of these other players, it's such a clean look with that orange and the blue with the blue helmet. It actually is a really clean look. So I really do enjoy these jerseys so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I got it all. Sorry, I got it all broken down right here. I got these two and put them up there. They're calling Sunset Orange, which is going to be the home uniform. One of the things I find interesting is these.
Welcome to HGTV, folks.
Yeah,
right. The triangles in the numbers. I find those a little interesting.
There's a lot of triangles there.
There's a lot of triangles everywhere, like up the side in the numbers. And listen, the little mountain thing with the blue here on the shoulder, it's like a lightning bolt. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Am I the only one that doesn't really see that? I mean, I kind of do, but I don't really see it like the Chargers logo.
Yeah.
I don't think it looks like the Chargers logo, but it's getting close.
I don't even think it's close.
I love it, but
no, I don't think it's
close. Your Summit White, your away jerseys. Again, repping the brand 5280 right there. Boom.
It's damn close to our logo font too.
I know, right? That's and then your alternate jerseys, your Midnight Navy. Yeah, I like that they kept the Broncos there in the middle. I like the new font on the numbers. 5280 right there on the helmet. Repping. And then obviously, as you saw at the end of that reveal video, boom, the 77 throwbacks.
Those are
those are amazing. And that was the only year that they wore those 3 striped socks like that. So, I was trying to figure out how many times we could wear the throwbacks. And between the throwbacks and the blue alternate, we can wear a total of 3. So my guess is we'll probably get the throwbacks for 2. We'll get the all blue for 1. But unfortunately, we only get a maximum of 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say the maximum is 3.
You
can wear,
combined. Yeah.
But yeah, there's just for me there's just a lot to like about these uniforms, and I think that. Look, I mean, I realize it may not necessarily be everyone's cup of tea, and that's fine. I think the thing that I really, really enjoy about this, for me, is that Damani Leach and the entire team spent years and hours poured into this to make it like a legitimate, uniform that, Broncos country will really, really enjoy. And I think that, you know, you clearly see it in the jerseys itself. I mean, obviously, yeah, there's a lot of triangles, but if you haven't noticed, there's a lot of mountain ranges, and there's I think that like you look at the number, and it's so small enough you can't really tell if they're triangles necessarily, so it really doesn't matter. And the whole point of the triangles on the side was to also signify the Super Bowls that they won, which I think is really cool. And I think that for the Broncos, like I think one of the reasons why I like it is because it's a very college type uniform, and there are a lot of really good collegiate uniforms in college. And I think that the 5280 was like that final touch for me. That was like, these really go like crazy. And so, and I think the cherry on top for me was the pants, right? Because we see the tops of those uniforms, and so to see the stripes go down the pants, I thought was a really nice touch, because I think so much of
I
us.
can't. I don't want to see that. No.
Again, the Garrett Bowles uniform of that one is not good either.
That takes the hip drop tackle to a whole nother
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's now bring flopping to football, if you know what I mean.
Oh, good Lord.
Sorry, children.
But I think that the most important thing is gone are the days of those just awful combinations we saw in London. Okay. So like that is never going to happen again. And the Broncos will actually have pants in that kind of scenario that will actually go with the uniform like that. So for anything, that is actually a huge, huge positive with that.
But Cam, you're saying that they spent a lot of time on it, and it did behoove them to do that, because they do stand to if the fans like it, to make a lot of merchandise and sales and jersey sales. I'm still trying to get used to the helmets. I think they're kind of a little strange, and the explanation is a little weird on it, but I think I'll probably get it. But the throwbacks, that won me over. So like really after that, I'm cool with just about anything. So.
I do admit, the more and more I look at them, the more and more I feel like they kind of botched the helmet situation a little bit. I love the Navy helmets, but they go so much better with that Navy uniform. I would have rather had the whites for the regular uniforms, and the white uniforms in particular, and then reserve those navies for a special occasion. Break them out towards the end of the season, break them out for a big primetime game. Those could be our big primetime navies. Those are my favorite uniforms that the Denver Broncos have been the all navies. But
yeah,
I feel like that's a situation that they kind of got wrong a little bit, because I just don't know how well that matte navy goes, especially with the whites in particular. It feels like the whites were a lot more meant to go with the white helmets. And this is where I think the NFL is going to come in probably next year, as they evolve their helmet rules a little bit. Remember, just a few years ago, we could only use one helmet shell. Then it went up to 2. Now it's gone up to 3. They'll probably make it to where helmet combinations will be more interchangeable, and you won't be reserved to having to wear one helmet with one uniform combination. You could use any helmet that you have with any uniform combination. I imagine the NFL will eventually get to that point. Obviously, those of us who played Madden, it'll be to that point immediately.
Right.
But that's something that I feel like will come in due time, and we could get those looks a little bit more lined up helmet-wise with where they need to be. But, dude, the all-Navy jerseys, helmet aside, are absolutely phenomenal. Those are ones that I feel like are going to stick for a very long time. The oranges are nice and clean. I'm somebody who prefers the blue jerseys to the orange jerseys. I always have, but I like the oranges and the whites, man. I think those did really, really well. I like them, but again, they're just meant to go with that white helmet.
Even the white and blue, even the white and blue with the
it's salmon, Rich.
Yeah.
No, it's full-fledged. Full flashbang. I look like one of the Dun Kings.
The only thing I don't like about the uniforms right now is that stripe on the back of the helmet. And I'm not saying that I won't. It's just, it's a little weird. It's a little out of place. I think they should have just gone with a clean helmet. I love the matte blue, the matte white. And just the logo on the sides would have been fine. I'm not sure why they put that stripe on there. I'm assuming at some point we'll get used to it, but right now it's just a little weird.
They did kill it with the unveiling, and I love the players that they selected. Tim Patrick was a part of it. Jaleel was a part of it on the throwback side.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Cortland Sutton wasn't.
Exactly. I mean, if that doesn't tell you, the state of his relationship with the team on both sides, I don't know what to say. I mean, that I think he is not going to be around come training camp. I mean, that just was very telling. They talked about how the captains played an important part and had input in these uniform selections. And one of our captains is not in the unveiling video, interestingly enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth, bringing back the interview that I recently did with Mike Liss, where he kind of pushed back on that idea. Like, he kind of pushed back on the idea that Cortland, would be moved. He actually said that he didn't feel like he was going to be traded. I still think it's a tad bit noteworthy that he wasn't in the video, but it's worth mentioning though that it was also voluntary still, and you will start noticing it more and more and more if he's not there for that, for the mandatory minicamp. That's when you're really starting to really understand, or better yet, the trade actually happens in 3 days, right? The trade happens actually in 3 days is when you'll actually know.
Well, and I get where everybody's coming from, though, right? Like, there were a lot of fans that were like, oh, PS2 is going to get traded in the draft so we can move up. They featured him in every single shot of the throwbacks, of the new uniforms, everything. Like, PS2 is not going anywhere.
Then we had
him in everything.
And then the news about PS2 today, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they just, there's not really much to talk about. It probably should have happened earlier, but they just picked up PS2's 5th-year option. Like, he's going nowhere. So it's odd that they're featuring PS2 so much and Cortland Sutton isn't in anything, right? Like, you have to assume even though it's voluntary, you have to assume he got a phone call like, hey, we're unveiling these uniforms. As a team captain, we would love to have you there.
I mean, that was planned ahead far in advance because they had to fit the uniforms to the guys that were a part of it. So that wasn't something like, hey, pop in if you want to be in the video. That was, they had that organized clearly. I mean, it was so well produced and such. That was not a willy-nilly deal.
As far as a timeline is concerned for a potential trade of Cortland Sutton, I think that when we come to day 3 of the draft and there's teams out there that haven't adequately addressed the wide receiver position in earlier rounds, there will still probably be really good players there. But if they want a more proven commodity right off the bat, maybe they could send one of their day 3 picks to Denver for Cortland Sutton. That's something that I've heard talked about before, and I think that it could make sense.
James Palmer was on DNVR today, and I believe the number of wide receivers that he has heard people suggesting could happen in the first 2 rounds was 17. I believe it was that. If not, it was between 15 and 17. So it's like that is a tremendous amount of top pick receivers when we're trying to unload a guy potentially that has a $13 million contract.
And let's not be remiss if we didn't bring up that they can also cut him for nothing either. Like, they can also cut him, and the moment he signs a new deal, the $2 million guaranteed you can basically bank on is going to be off the books. Like, once he signs with that new team. So yeah, they can easily, move on from him and save, that money. To circle back, I think it was also, in terms of featuring, let's just go to the throwback video, them featuring Pat Surtain. I think that was just more of the recognition that he's your franchise player. He's your cornerstone player. It really didn't necessarily, mean much in terms of like Cortland necessarily being, in that kind of thing. But he's your feature player. You may as well just feature him as such, especially in something when you're ushering in or bringing in the older era, if you will, especially with a guy like Randy Gradishar there, who recently was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So,
yeah. And then one of the other moves that was made, aside from obviously the future of the Broncos, Levi Wallace signed to Levi Wallace signs to the Broncos. I'm assuming as a rotational player.
Who knows? I mean, if you look at his history, I mean, the age is certainly something you want to look at, but he's been a starter the majority of his career. I mean, let's put it out there. He's been a starter the majority of his career, and I think that cornerback at 12 has been, a definite, talking point, of course, with mock drafts and everything else. But I think that this does put cornerback at 12 on the back burner. Not that it was already on the back burner, but it significantly puts it on the back burner for them. And I think if, you look at it, yeah, they definitely needed a body, but you definitely are looking at it from the Riley Moss perspective in the sense like, well, how do they feel about a guy specifically, for Moss into that? Do they still want to develop him? I think you can maybe develop him, make sure he still grows, but do they want to make sure that he's going to be that cornerback too? I mean, in a perfect world, competition's a beautiful thing. And what better, person to bring in the room than a starter who's been a starter his entire career and have him challenge, a Riley Moss, or better yet, a Damari Mathis, who actually ended the year really, really well in 2022, and then just failed miserably in 2023. So if Mathis resurges and Riley Moss actually develops, and then you include Wallace into that mix, you are talking about a rather deep and, fun-filled cornerback room that doesn't involve just Pat Surtain.
Yep. But I also think that this is a classic scenario. You have to look at what they're doing rather than what they're saying. George Paton said during the Broncos press conference back in January, I believe it was, that they viewed Riley Moss as a starter. But they've since made that move to go out and get a Levi Wallace, who has been a starter his whole career. Yes, he did get benched last year in Pittsburgh, but in his rookie year in Buffalo, he was phenomenal. But I also think that he's kind of steadily gone downhill as his career has gone forward. And it's all about where Levi is at this point in his career. He did say that there were other offers for him on the table. He chose to come to Denver because he wanted to play under Vance Joseph. I think that there might have been some promise of playing time there. And when you pivot back to Riley Moss, even when he was healthy last year, he had opportunities to see the field on defense. Fabian Moreau at the end of the year was unplayable. You could have inserted Riley in without much to lose just to see what he could do, and they weren't comfortable doing that. He only played on special teams where he did excel, but at the end of the day, man, you have to look at what they're doing here, and they brought in a starting caliber corner in Levi Wallace, probably with the promise he's going to get some playing time. This is not a good look for Riley Moss, and by extension, it's not a good look for Sean and George because they traded up in the third round and burned a future third to get him.
Well, and I'm assuming that we can look at this starting out at least, is that you're going to have Levi Wallace and Riley Moss kind of competing for time to see who takes the spot instead of just starting a Levi Wallace or starting a Riley Moss. I'm assuming it's going to be a camp battle thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 1,000%. But we should also preface this that we're having this conversation now, right? The plans change, right? Even into the season. So as Gage alluded to at training camp, if Moss comes in and he actually shows out and plays extremely well, and even Wallace and he actually plays, extremely well, they could actually favor, the young corner in that regard. But the fact that you still have a starter level corner behind a guy, like Moss, is still a good thing. And I think that, I saw Rich comment about, how he's a camp body. Look, this is not a Fabian Moreau thing. This is not a Fabian Moreau thing to where, he was a late signing. If you're going to actually talk about a camp body, Moreau would be, qualified as a camp body, not Wallace. And so I think that, and so I think that if you add Wallace to that mix, you are talking about a much better room. And I think that at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. I mean, yeah, they probably, still want to develop Riley, but it made the room better. At the end of the day, it made the room better. And that's the most important thing about all of this.
Yep. And, speaking of Fabian Moreau and camp battles, maybe they bring him back, come closer to camp. He could provide some interesting depth there as well. So I don't know, man. I think that the Broncos cornerback room is going to be really interesting, but the fact that they brought in a player of significant note in Levi Wallace and they didn't just flat out re-sign Fabian Moreau right out the gate, I think that does signify something.
Well, I did want to ask before we move on to the future of the franchise. We still have yet to see Justin Simmons go anywhere. I'm assuming he's going to be getting signed somewhere after the draft. But and I know we've talked about it before, but is Denver still an option to go get Justin Simmons back?
I think it is till it isn't.
Yeah. He's not signed, right?
No.
And I think that from everything that, you don't even have to necessarily, I would say, even have a source for this, but the way things have been going on for like weeks is like, it really seems like for one, he's waiting until after the draft. The safety free agency class has been exceptionally deep. And, the market, is where, Simmons probably has been seeing the market and he can get that maybe 2-year deal or 1-year deal or whatever he wants to sign, after the draft. And I think the important thing to also preface this on too is when we say after the draft, we don't necessarily mean right on like Monday morning, he signs with the Buffalo Bills or something, or he signs with the, Detroit Lions or something. So I think that there's still a very real possibility that Simmons understands his market so much, and he's been doing a lot of research and how things have been going down, that I wouldn't even be surprised if this thing drags over into training camp, that into where he's training, he's working his tail off, and this thing actually lingers a little bit into training camp. He's not going to be a Denver Bronco, but I mean, I will confidently say that I don't think he's going to be a Denver Bronco. But yeah, I do think that it's going to be a very interesting one. That I'm curious about his landing spot though, because if the teams that start to really be interested in him sign players that are not Justin Simmons, then maybe you start looking at it in the sense of like, if you're Simmons, maybe going home and staying home is the best option.
Just to show how beloved he is, the guy goes to the Nuggets game with his wife the other night, and it went burning through Broncos Twitter because that's how well liked he is. He's a smart guy. He's got a ton of opportunity, I would suggest. But like Cam said, when he became available, there were a ton of big name safeties that were available right around that same time. So the competition was, nobody was going to get a big money contract at that moment. So I do figure that the opportunities are going to, really present themselves after teams realize what they didn't get in the draft and where their deficiencies are in the defensive backfield.
Do you guys have a preference of where you would like to have him go still?
Lions.
I'd say Lions, and I've mentioned the Texans too, as a team that is on the rise and also not too far from Denver.
Yeah, the Texans would be certainly a lot of fun. I think that with Jalen Petrie being there, though, I wonder if that's enough to, maybe cause Simmons to, maybe pull back a little bit. But the same thing could even be said about San Francisco. Like, I would love to see him on San Francisco, be a part of, that kind of defense. But I think it's pretty understandable where he's going to be going. He wants to go to a contending team. And I would love to see the Lions for sure.
Ideally one in the NFC.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we all kind of saw like near the end of the season, the Lions secondary just started to fall apart.
Yeah.
It got rough there. So definitely adding a Justin Simmons would help solidify that secondary. That's why I'd love to see him go there. But let's talk about the reason why Denver's not going to take a quarterback in the draft.
No.
Denver makes a trade for Zach Wilson. Woo! Future franchise quarterback. Yes.
We're not trolling, by the way. It actually happened. Yeah, you're not in the twilight.
We're not trolling about them trading for him, but
yeah,
I'm just no way in hell is Zach Wilson. I'm going to be on the record saying this. He's not going to start a single game for the Denver Broncos.
Okay, so no, hold on. Now, I was not a fan of Zach Wilson on the Jets. Like it's the same thing as like Drew Lock in Denver, right? Like he wasn't done any favors. I don't think that the offensive coordinators he had, I mean, for God's sakes, he had Nathaniel Hackett last year. We've already seen that story. I'm not saying that he's going to be like the franchise guy. He's going to be a starter. We know that he has a high ceiling, but we also know that he's got a very low basement. So I think for Zach Wilson, coming to Denver is probably the best move for him because you're pairing him with two good coaches in Sean Payton and Davis Webb that got the most out of Russell Wilson and can get the most out of him. So I'm not saying he's going to be great, but I do think that with what we've seen from Zach Wilson, what he could be, there is a possibility that he beats out Jarrett Stidham.
Well, and there's zero risk with this move.
Yeah.
I mean, to swap a 6 and a 7 and have the Jets pay half the salary. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer. Book clubs will never be the same in Denver starting next season. But beside that, Jeff, just seeing Jeff Bryant. I think it's a fine move. Mike seems rather gleeful that the Broncos aren't taking a quarterback, which means that his beloved Sam Hartman is
or better yet, Ryan Tannehill and Sam Hartman.
Listen, imagine that quarterback room, right? Like
no, I do not.
You have Zach Wilson, you have Jarrett Stidham, Ben DiNucci, and Sam Hartman. Boom!
I will say this. Yes, Zach Wilson wasn't done any favors in terms of having Nathaniel Hackett, but prior to that, he had a very competent offensive coach in Mike LaFleur. And he still couldn't get his basics right, his fundamentals right, his footwork right, his accuracy, little basic stuff that is pivotal to playing the quarterback position at a high level. I gave Zach Wilson praise in my video yesterday for seeming to showcase some maturity and growth as a person when you compare his press conferences from 2022 where he took no accountability, threw his teammates under the bus, to 2023 in a game after he played arguably the best game of his career to that point against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was taking accountability for a game that it wasn't even his fault that they lost. It was because of some ref ball at the end. So I think that when it comes to Zach Wilson, there is that level of growth, but the Broncos making this move, it needs to be stated for what it is. It's them acquiring a high upside backup quarterback that should in no way, shape, or form affect their draft plans. If anything, it's insurance in case stuff doesn't go their way in the draft.
Yeah.
But even then, Zach Wilson is not going to be plan A for the Denver Broncos. Jarrett Stidham would get the nod over Wilson, and Wilson's going to have to do a lot in order to see playing time. But I still firmly believe, and I will hold on to this based on good information, that the Denver Broncos will use their first pick in the draft, not necessarily at 12, but they will use their first round pick on a quarterback. And they will have a quarterback room consisting of a first round pick, Zach Wilson, and Jarrett Stidham. Those are 3 darts that you could throw onto the board. Obviously, Jarrett Stidham, maybe not so much of one, but definitely the first 2. And you're hedging your bets as to maybe one of them could develop and be your guy long term.
Gage, I agree with you completely. This is insurance just in case things do go south and some mystery teams snake the Broncos on a potential pick. But I definitely believe that Denver is going to be taking a quarterback in the first round. The question is where in the first round are they going to be taking them? You know, do you have a hunch, Gage, as far as like a vibe that you think? I think they're going to trade back and go with a Knicks, but James Palmer, again, to quote him, he was suggesting that the Broncos may have to trade up for Michael Penix Jr., that he is quietly sneaking up the draft boards behind the scenes and that people are not talking about them because they want him to fall.
There is one team that is significantly interested in Penix, and I don't think it's bluffing. And ironically enough, it's the team that plays in the city of gambling, Las Vegas. The Raiders are smitten over Michael Penix Jr. They want Jaden Daniels, but they know they're not going to get him. The Commanders are holding firm with the number 2 overall pick, and they're going to use that pick on Jaden Daniels. So they're going to pivot to their next best option, which is Michael Penix Jr. But I also entertained this on my show earlier. There's a scenario where if Denver trades down and leaves Bo Nix for the taking at 13, the Raiders might take him just out of spite to screw the Broncos.
Yep. And it would kind of scream like a Raider move, wouldn't it? Like as far as like, you know, a reach, possibly, if you will. I just think that, you know, again, you know, you guys described it perfectly. You know, it's an insurance policy. It's an insurance policy in the sense that, you know, if they didn't go for quarterback, you can at least ride with Jarrett Stidham. And then if nothing comes to shove, then, you know, you can roll Zach Wilson out there. I will tell you this. If they officially announced the trade, right? They officially announced the trade today. Let me just preface it this way. If they hold a press conference introducing Zach Wilson, they're not drafting a quarterback at all in the 2024 NFL draft. So they will take one. They absolutely will take one. I actually feel like if this, and I will say this, if the stuff is true about Bo Nix into the second round, the stuff is true even with Bo Nix in the second round, the Broncos in a trade down scenario still might lean themselves into the plans of them still not changing, in the sense that they actually trade back with maybe a couple ideal scenarios. I think one of the more popular scenarios has been Philly, right? You trade down with Philly, you acquire, you know, their second round pick, you acquire their 22nd pick, right? And then maybe you know, you take a lot to there at 22, and then you know, maybe you take your second round pick and you move up into the second round. And then at that point, that's when you take Bo Nix, right? So I think that, like, in that second round, if you can possibly even go edge there and then get Nix, I think you're talking about at least for maybe a majority of Broncos country that are maybe on the fence with Nix, like a much more palpable situation with Nix there, because you are talking about taking an edge and then Nix in that second round. But again, like it does feel that even with Zach Wilson not even being here, that Nix had just been the Garrett Bowles favorite in this draft to be the Denver Broncos draft pick. You know, it screams that way. For me, it just screams this idea of, you know, he just seems like he's bound to be a Denver Bronco. Every single interview that he's done, Colin Cowherd now, Kay Adams, RG3, Chris Sims, you know, I mean, like every single conversation that has been had has been, Joe Klatt has even talked about it ad nauseum when he breaks down the prospects, saying that the best fit for Bo Nix is Sean Payton in Denver. You know, I mean, like we're talking about smarter people than all of us in this room, and they feel like Bo Nix is a perfect fit for Sean. And so I think that like it's an important thing. Like I would not be surprised if Bo Nix is a Denver Bronco. Maybe not necessarily at pick 12, but later on, I would not be surprised.
How far down do you think we could trade back and get a second round pick?
28.
I think we could probably get down towards the end of the first, but my ideal scenario is to get ahead of a team like the Los Angeles Rams, who may want to mortgage the future or maybe want to plan for the future a little bit, because Matthew Stafford is getting up there in age. So if they want to kind of have an insurance policy there in case he gets hurt or just kind of starts to decline his play a little bit, that's a team that I've heard might be potentially in the market for a first-round quarterback.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned the Rams, right? That's who you mentioned, the Rams. Yeah. One of the things that I heard too is, I guess, what is it? Les Shine. That's his name, right?
Snead.
What is it?
Snead.
Snead. No, Snead. I don't know why I said Shine.
He's less shiny, but
anyway,
I'm more shiny though.
Yeah, I think that I will say I think that he's really good friends. He's really good friends with the family, the Knicks family, and I think that that's one of the reasons why they're really pumping up the fact that maybe they go out and they get Knicks to possibly back up Matt Stafford. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I'm guessing the stuff that's been lingering with Stetson Bennett and the Rams, because I think Stetson Bennett is I think he's suspended or something. So I wouldn't be surprised if they went out and drafted Bo. But in the first round makes it kind of telling that he's would be the heir apparent versus a Stetson Bennett, who was a very like a day 3 pick, if you will. So I wouldn't be surprised by it at all.
Yeah, I mean, Snead and Bo's dad played football together, so
Yeah.
there is a history there.
yeah, I don't know. There's so many ways to look at this. If Denver stays at 12, they're not taking quarterback at 12.
They're not,
Because there's no, unless McCarthy falls or May falls, then obviously they'll take one of those two at 12. But if they don't, 12 is way too high. Like, as much as you may love Bo Nix, 12 is way too high to draft Bo Nix.
If you love him,
That's
if
the
you
thing.
love him,
thing.
and you're worried about the Raiders,
That's way too high. Like, he's got a second round grade on him. Doesn't even make sense
But
to draft that
But
high.
if he's your guy, that's the thing. Is
Yeah.
I mean, is the risk worth the reward? I mean, what if that's their guy and they lose him because they wanted to be a little bit greedy or a little bit a little bit cute?
conservative.
Yeah, I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, there's a lot of intel that floats around behind the scenes on what the teams are looking for. But if he's your guy, you gotta do it. I can't see them moving up and spending a lot of assets to move up for anyone in this draft. Quite honestly, I just don't.
I will say. I think that this scenario could play out almost in the reverse of what happened with Bradley Chubb in 2018. If anybody remembers what happened in 2018, the Broncos had a trade back deal in place, like a handshake agreement with Buffalo. Ironically enough, Buffalo is a trade up candidate once again, but this time for a wide receiver. But I think that maybe they have a handshake agreement for a trade in place if JJ McCarthy is not within reach for Denver. If JJ is within reach for Denver in that, say 7 to 9 range, that's 7 to 9 range, and with all certainty that Minnesota is not going to be taking JJ McCarthy, then you go out and you outbid the Minnesota Vikings to get within those slots, and you take JJ McCarthy. That's a much more ideal situation to trade up for something like that versus trading up to 3 or trading up to 2 or whatever, like even to 4. Like it's way more palpable on something like that. So I think that something like that is still doable. But if that doesn't happen, then yeah, I am absolutely making sure that I'm trading back. And I still think, and I will say, I thought that was a bit telling in the sense when we asked Callis last week, we said, what is your preference, right? We asked him what his preference was. And he asked like what he feels the Broncos will do. And he said, well, my preference is to trade back. And what I think they will do is trade back. So, you get the sense, and we said it before, based on the draft economics and what they have for draft capital, I wouldn't be surprised if they traded back. In fact, if they are in favor of taking on so much capital, depending on where they trade back to, I wouldn't be surprised if they trade back twice in the first. Like, it's like, say you drop down to Cincinnati at like 18, and then you trade back to wherever, and you accumulate another second round pick, right? I would not be upset at that, because you're accumulating more and more capital for another team that maybe wants to move up and stuff. So I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they traded back twice in the first.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the possibilities Denver has, I think the least likely is them staying at 12. I think you're looking more along the lines of if J.J. McCarthy is there at, say, 9, I think Denver trades up to 9, and I think Cortland Sutton is part of that trade. If he's not, then I think they bump back to probably 18, 19.
I mean, I don't know. The thing is, for me, I honestly don't know the answer, because I don't know the Broncos' plans. So they can take a player at 12, and we've kind of talked over it, right? Like, there are far more better non-quarterback options at 12 than there are, just actually taking a guy. Like Brock Bowers and Roma Dunze are there. You're talking about a very rough situation and who you're going to be taking between a Dunze and Bowers. Or, if you're really contemplating having a replacement for Garrett Bowles, Olu Fatanu, maybe, if Fatanu doesn't go, maybe in the top 10, or maybe even, a little bit later, or maybe even Fuaga. If Fuaga doesn't go, where, people maybe feel like he's going, there's just far more even tackle opportunities for you at 12. So like, it's really hard for me to be like, well, or like predict like, oh, I could see them staying at 12, or I could actually like see them, trading back. Like, I think logically, right? That's why we always talk about it. Like, logically, it just makes so much sense for them to trade back and take that capital. But we're not Sherlock Holmes and understanding truly like what's going through the mind of, Sean Payton's head. So like, because again, we got to remember that George Payton's the one that wants to trade back. Sean Payton is typically the one that wants to trade up. So what's the compromise going to be?
Yeah. Anything else we want to talk about?
Well, why don't you talk about what's going on the network on Thursday?
Oh, good Lord. There's a lot going on this week, like Thursday included, but like tonight it's this show. We've got Sports Nonsense and Whiskey. Bill and I are getting ready to do the neighborhood for the Avs. And then Wednesday, you got your regular lineup. Thursday is going to be fun because we are live streaming on the neighborhood the first round of the draft. And I'm hoping that as many people as possible that are host shows on the network can join us. Everybody is welcome. Everyone is invited. We would love to see you there. It's going to start 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain when the draft starts. So make sure you tune into that. It's going to be fun. Like, we have a first round pick. We have a first round pick that has happened in forever.
That's right.
So that'll be fun.
Cam, what do you have going on tomorrow? Engage. What do you have going on with your channel?
So we're doing a first round mock. We're actually going to be doing a first round mock live stream, which is going to be a lot of fun. There really isn't, anything as far as a guest or whatnot, but both Maddie, Brandon, and I will be controlling picks, And so we were, going to be playing GM for a day. And actually, we went through the whole situation. And if you guys are very interested, I do control the Denver Broncos pick. So I hate to say that I, actually will be in the mind of Sean Payton and actually selecting possibly what they might do. But, so yeah, I actually am going to play Sean Payton, George Payton for a day.
Oh, great. We're going to get a cornerback.
That's right. We're going to take a Torrey Taylor from Iowa at 12.
There we go.
Well, Broncos Syndicate next couple of days, we'll be doing a lot of draft prep, and then I will also be doing a stream on draft night for all 3 days for the draft on Broncos Syndicate. So you'll have to pick your poison between this show and Broncos Syndicate. Come to this show. And and then, so I'll be doing a whole lot of pre-draft stuff for the next couple of days. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So how do you, that's going to be like some Scott Hansen type of stamina for if you're doing 3 days worth of that.
Yep. I've done it I did it last year and did the 2 days of it the year before that. So yeah.
Yeah, that gives me some flashbacks. So for anybody that doesn't know, when we first started, mainly Broncos, both Maddie and I, like the very first year, it was the Jerry Jeudy draft, right? So 2020, we didn't necessarily have a podcast format, but we had the Periscope format. And obviously, everybody knows I'm a writer for Predominantly Orange, and you do content off to the side. So we were doing draft reactions for every single draft selection in the first round. And I was also, once they took, Jerry Jeudy, also pumping out articles all in the meantime, for possibly, the content there. So it's just, I could not do it. I think Maddie and I only could do it for like a day. It was so exhausting. I think I slept in for like, 8 more hours that following day. Like it was just so exhausting.
All right, so that's basically what's going on the network this week. I've got to get going because I got the neighborhood getting ready to start. The Avs game just started. Any closing thoughts? We good?
Well, I was just gonna say, do you guys have a change on? I know we did the call your shot last week for the draft. Has it changed at all for possibly what it is that you feel like they're going to do in terms of a prediction?
I think I've made my stance pretty clear. Their first pick will be a quarterback. It's just when will that first pick come? Okay.
I'm changing mine because, let's be real. Mine was a bit realistic. No, ridiculous last week. I'll just say they take Bo Nix in the first round.
Sounds about right.
They're going to take Sam Hartman at 12. All right.
We're going to do the 12.
Yeah, we appreciate everybody that joined the show. There's too many to even name, but Biggie, Bronco, Jay, Brian, Melissa, Joey. I can go on. Carter, Spence. Bronco
Graham.
Breakdown. You know who you are, Rich. I guess we can thank him. Yeah. Thanks for joining the show. Make sure you tune into all the stuff that's going on this week. There is an awful lot going on this week, so make sure you check it out. And check out the live streams for the draft. You can do Gage's show, or you can do the Better Show and do the Neighborhood, whichever one you decide you want to do. It'll be great. We'd love to see you. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. Let's go, Sam Hartman. Peace out.
Fast lane when I pass in the street. Bag of money in the passenger seat. Pimples been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out.